Hi, I'm Tim of the Watchbox, and thank you for logging on today. We strive to answer a critical question. Is the Rolex Sub Smurf worth 3 of the Platinum Steel Yacht Masters? That's the question. I'm finding the answer. These two timepieces are both 40mm oyster case Rolex sports watches. They are identically powered with the exact same movement, but they are worlds apart in price and detail. Two timepieces from opposite ends of the Rolex spectrum. This one's perhaps a little bit more utilitarian in its roots, whereas this one has always been a patrician. It's the combination of precious metal and rotating bezels that makes this an intriguing 3-for-1 swap. 3 of these for 1 of these? Let's find out. Let's start with the known quantity, the Sub. Released in 1953, the model you see here, bowed in 2008, the first of the supercase Submariners, the first of the ceramic bezel Submariners, and the first ever serially produced white gold Submariner. That is part of the appeal of this watch, that it's historically significant to Rolex. Historically significant subs tend to be historically significant watches objectively, so this timepiece has a lot going for it. You can also see that the timepiece, 40mm, is not terribly thick on the wrist. Believe it or not, only 12.2 millimeters thick. This one slides low and underneath just about any cuff. Now, in terms of its stance across the wrist, 48mm lug to lug, 51mm end link to end link. Of course, the diameter of the watch, and we'll move a little bit away and perhaps give ourselves a bit less light because we're overpowering this thing. But you can see that the diameter of the watch is the same as the Yacht Master, but it does seem larger because of the squared off ends of the lugs themselves. This is an important point of distinction because the shape of the case and the volume of the case really does make the difference between the two. If you take a look at the squared off ends of the super case and the sheer sides, you can compare them to what you get on the Yacht Master. The Yacht Master seems almost more like a Daytona, a Datejust, or a Date-8 than the Sub or the GMT. Now, jumping back real quick to the Sub, I'm going to throw this on the wrist just one more time, give you a good sense of it now that we've adjusted our light and focus. But that's its stance across the wrist, and that's its stance down the arm. 20mm lug spacings for both of these watches, the oyster bracelet for both featuring polished center links. Of course, you can see polished outer flanks, satin shoulders, removable links fixed by screws, and a clamshell locking system for the clasp. So far, so good. This is all the same between the two models. Now, here's where the Submariner really draws a distinction. You have this Glidelock system, 20mm of adjustment in 2mm increments. This can be your all-or-nothing pull-out extension over a dive suit, or you can use it for precise sizing. This is something the Yacht Master flat-out doesn't have, and it adds a tremendous amount of value, since you can see that externally, there's not a huge distinction in the size of these clasp shells, so you may as well get the better clasp. Now, moving closer to the case and back up the bracelet, you can see that the integration of end link and case is pretty much seamless. It's tough to argue that these watches should be put on a strap under any circumstances because the bracelets are so solid and the ergonomics are great. Won't pinch skin, won't pull hair, won't trap heat. The case itself is virtually indistinguishable from stainless steel, so if you like your stealth wealth, this is a great way to wear it. It is immense, not just in its super case proportions, but in its actual mass. This is a lot of heavy metal, and you really feel the difference when it's on the wrist compared to the Yacht Master. But the case is severe. I don't want to call it artless, but it does feel more industrial than the nostalgically tinged Yacht Master. You can see a triple lock crown with the characteristic large center dot and smaller flanking dots. Lets you know you're looking at a trip lock in white gold. And just for comparison's sake, let's take a quick look at the crown on the Yacht Master, which you can see is also a trip lock, albeit in steel. I think the Yacht Master's 100-meter rating is conservative, but the Sub is 300, and that's how Rolex grades it, so I'm given the advantage on that basis. The first ever ceramic bezel on a Sub. Let's hear its click. It's fine, it's refined, but it's very crisp. The ceramic bezel superbly resists scratches, and of course, if you want this lacquered blue dial, the white gold Sub is now the only place to get it. You can't get it on the two-tone anymore, you can't get it on the yellow gold anymore, and it perfectly matches the gloss blue of the bezel itself. Scratch-resistant bezel insert, the dial wonderfully glossy, almost gleaming like lacquer or enamel, and I believe it is a lacquer application. White gold indices, Mercedes hands at center, caliber 3135 underneath the case back, 48-hour power reserve, free sprung balance, full balance bridge for shock resistance, overcoil hairspring, superlative chronometer, so COSC, and then adjusted to +2, -2, or better per 24 hours. It's both a chronometer and Rolex's superlative standard. And again, 300-meter water resistance, screw-down crown, 31 joules, bidirectional automatic winding stop seconds, and of course a quick set date. Now let's jump over to the Yacht Master. The Yacht Master bowed in 1992, and the model you see right here, the 116622 in platinum and stainless steel, this launched in 2012. So the timepiece is the same outright dimension as the Sub, but it really doesn't look or feel anything like the Sub. They're both 40s, but on the wrist you can see that this one is a bit more delicate, and I don't mean that in a fragile sense, I mean in a graceful sense. You could see the lines of the case so distinct from what you get with the Sub, primarily due to the slim profile, the rounded ends of the case, and the delicate taper of the ends of the lugs. Now let's move out a little bit and get a better sense of the watch on the wrist. You can see that it has a full figured stance, but it's not oversized. And in terms of its thickness, it is slimmer. 12.2 is the Sub. This is actually 11.6. 20 millimeter spacing. If you wish to put it on a strap, it might look a bit more natural on a strap than the Sub, though I would recommend once again just going with what Rolex hath wrought. The Oyster bracelet is superb. Lug to lug, the watch is 47.4, and if you include the solid end links, 50 millimeters link to link versus 51 for the Sub. Alright, jumping back to the bracelet and getting a little bit closer. You can see that the finish is the same. They're almost indistinguishable, steel to white gold. Screws to remove the sizable links. It uses a clamshell system, and of course neither one of these is truly just a clamshell system. There's also an articulated trigger built into the clasp with a beak and hook arrangement. So when it's closed, you can't just pull it open. It has a double lock. You have the clamshell, and then you have the beak and hook and the trigger. Now, this is where things get a little bit different. You've got Easy Link, which is fun because it's a 5 millimeter adjustment system. It's the equivalent to adding or removing one sizable link. So 5 millimeters tool-free, and then there are 3 alternate anchoring points inside the clasp, but you don't have anything like the Easy Link, or I should say Glidelock, flexibility of the Sub. You have Easy Link, which is nice, but it's not quite as good as Glidelock. Now jumping back to the case, I talked about the lines of the case. Let's take another quick look at what I'm speaking of. I'm talking about these graceful lug ends, and also the fact that there's a little bit of a rounded profile to the case itself. Let's get everything in focus here. Okay, and when I show you that, and I show you the Sub adjacent, you can see how much more severe the Sub looks. The Yacht Master is a throwback, so let's quickly take a look at what you get topside. You get a bezel that is all precious metal. It's a platinum bezel, and you can see relieved and polished indices with a blasted base, so it's not scratch resistant the way ceramic is, but it's also not cheap to manufacture the way ceramic is. Platinum is a precious metal that gives this one a little bit of unexpected heft. And it is a yachtsman's bezel, not diving, so you can move it in either direction. Ideal for counting down to the start of a match or one race within a regatta, a sailboat race. The crown profiles, or crown guard profiles I should say, are almost exactly the same. Now the dial is sensational. Rather than the gloss of the Sub, this one is sunburst. And you can really see that difference when you put them next to each other. This is gloss, this is lacquer, this is gleaming, this is like wet paint. This is more like a crisp metallic grain radiating out from the center, and you can see that to good effect as I move it in the light. A few well-chosen shocks of red to really make that blue pop, and you can see all applique white gold indices as well as Mercedes hands at center. Lollipop seconds, gotta love that. Inside the case, 100 meters water resistant, the same Rolex caliber 3135 that we saw in the Sub. 100 meters water resistant, but generally you see a twin lock crown on the 100 meter Rolex cases. This one is a trip lock, so I suspect this watch is more than 100 meters water resistant. It's nice to know it's there, though you may never need it. So let's talk about their advantages. Okay, this is a watch that retails new for $11,500, and the white gold Sub retails for $36,850, so you can get more than 3 of these for one of the white gold Sub. The timepiece is more elegant, graceful about the profile of its lugs as well as the sweep and compound curves of its case. It has a more expensive bezel, it has a more expensive looking dial. All of that is to its advantage. I'll also mention that if you want a watch to do everything in one piece, this can be your dress watch and your sports watch with ease. The Sub's a little bit more brutal. So let's talk about, and by the way, $10,000 to $11,000 pre-owned. Let's talk about the Sub real quick. Okay, unrivaled heritage, image, and name recognition. If you want the status and prestige engine, this is still it. Rolex is the Submariner. The Submariner is Rolex. If Rolex is the ultimate watch brand, the Sub is the ultimate Rolex. Now, let's talk about the Durability. The clasp gives you so much more flexibility to wear your watch in a sporting environment, or simply size as your wrist expands or contracts. And you have the 300-meter water-resistant case for a little bit extra margin for error. And finally, you do have that unmistakable Submariner look. So even if it's not snob appeal, there is something timeless about the Sub that transcends luxury, that even transcends the watch industry. There's a reason this is the world's most copied watch. But I have to go with my heart here. I have to go with the Yacht Master. It's simply more my style. It's more graceful. I prize elegance over status, and I prize grace over brutality. This would be my choice among the two. Let me know yours in the comments below. Rolex Sub and Rolex Yacht Master. We're going to call this a draw between the 116622 and the 116619. See them and make your choice by the light of day on the watch box.